Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the final webinar of AWS Solutions Architect, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward, and I'll be your MC. Your mentor is Scott Farrell, of course. As always, before we begin, some housekeeping, beginning with Zoom functions. We ask that you direct course questions directly related to materials that Scott's presenting to the Q&A section, and ask administrative questions via the chat function. I'm sure you're all on top of that by now, so I won't go into it too much. Before we get flooded with questions, I have some course information about the exam. And don't worry, we'll repeat and expand upon that news at the end of the webinar with Scott. I should make it clear too that I'm talking about the exam associated with this IT Masters short course, not any AWS exams. So, the course exam will be available to students by close of business Friday, Australian Eastern Standard Time, so 5 o'clock, to allow you a weekend at it when it's fresh in the mind. You are required to complete all the participation hurdle quizzes associated with each webinar and module before you can access the exam and earn the short course certificate. The exam can be done at any time. It's always going to be there, but we recommend not leaving this one for too long. Set yourself a deadline, or else it might slip through the cracks and the content might be out of your mind as well. The exam consists of 40 multiple choice questions, and the pass mark for the exam is 50%. Some of the questions, in fact, I think many questions will have multiple possible answers, which is a nice change of pace, I think. Please note the exam can only be attempted once, and that you will have 1 hour to complete it once you begin it, unlike the hurdle quizzes. It is open book though, and you can save your progress, but the hour countdown can't be stopped once it's begun. So do not attempt the exam until you're certain you're ready, or as ready as you're likely to get. A reminder email will be sent out once the exam is available on Friday, and we'll send another reminder a couple of weeks after that, just to shove you along. If you have any technical difficulties, please email us at shortcourses@itmasters.edu.au as soon as possible. I'll chuck that in the chat soon, address, and we'll try and figure out what's happened and maybe organise a reset. For more information, you can read the How Do I Qualify for a Certificate link in the course page at learn.itmasters.edu.au, the Moodle page we've been using. And again, we'll cover this at the conclusion of the webinar, as I said, so please hold your exam questions until then. For the final time this course, here's Scott. Can you please welcome Scott for another wonderful week?
G'day everybody. So this week we're going to look at security, and security is a huge subject. A lot of people either fall into one of two camps, and they think the cloud is unsecure and unsafe, and they're better off keeping their applications in their own environment. And other people think, well, I'll just put it up there with Amazon. Amazon, they're a big name. They'll keep my application safe. And I'll say, if you fall into one of those two camps, you're both wrong. My take on it is that AWS and the cloud is more secure than your on-premise organization. But by default, Amazon aren't going to do anything for you, that you've got to set it up and deploy the right security. So that's why I'm going to teach you how to deploy the right security tonight. So let's go on to the first slide. So protecting your cloud deployment. So there's a lot of internet nasties out there. A lot of the hacking's automated these days. So people think that they're being hacked by some person sitting in another country going on a keyboard trying to hack you. That's so rare that almost doesn't happen. So almost all the hacking's automated. So there's gangs of servers hacking other servers, and the main reason you're being hacked is to get part of their gang of hacking servers to hack more people. So they don't know who you are, but I'm trying to hack and exploit your server to make their bunch of servers bigger. There's distributed denial of service attacks that you've got to deal with. I'll go into a bit more about these as we go along. There's application hacking. So you put an application on your server that might have holes or poor code in it, so that can be exploited. And we're going to talk about, you want authorized users to do proper things. So we're going to talk about that as well. So let's just start having a look at how AWS can help you. So there's many levels of security out at AWS. So distributed denial of service is one of the first ones we'll look at. And here's the different things you can do with that. You can use AWS Shield, AWS WAF, and AWS Marketplace. And I've got detailed slides on each of these as we go. You can also help protect the infrastructure. And the things that you need to protect the infrastructure is the VPC, security groups, and network ACLs. So this is a bit more like a traditional firewall. So if you've got on-site, on-premise equipment, no doubt you'll have a physical firewall somewhere in your organization that's doing the security for you. So this is, this level is a bit more like that physical firewall. And then you've got access control, allowing users to do things that they're authorized to do. And then there's logging, which is AWS CloudFront. And then we're going to step into each of these in a bit more detail as we go. AWS DDoS mitigation. So denial of service attacks, there's many different sorts of denial of service attacks, but a lot of them happened at layer 3 or 4. So they can be ping attacks, reflection attacks. They can be attacks by sending malformed packets. They can be attacks of sending thousands of or millions of packets a second. And there's just so many ways of doing denial of service attacks. And so this is what AWS Shield is used for. So it's helping to protect your network, helping to protect so that these malformed packets don't hit your, don't go any further than AWS Shield, that they get stopped. The basic level of AWS Shield is free. How good is that? So you've got some DDoS mitigation built in from AWS for free. And this is a huge value to AWS customers. Most people don't know about that that's there, and it's quite valuable. The AWS Shield Advanced is $3,000 a month, and for large corporates, you probably don't want to turn that on in your own account. The other thing that I didn't write here, AWS networks are so big. Normally when you have an on-premise network, you might buy 10 megabits or 100 megabits of network bandwidth. And then if you get attacked and that bandwidth gets overrun, you're sort of dead in the water. That can't really happen at AWS because their bandwidth is just so big. They really can't run out of network bandwidth. And they do a lot of making sure that you don't run out, that can't be attacked like that. So that's one good way that you're probably more protected than on-premise already, just by using AWS and AWS Shield. VPCs, I'll go into that. I'm just going to have a quick look at a question, see if anyone's got questions about this bit yet. No. Okay. So looking at the bit more on the DDoS mitigation on security. So the AWS WAF. So WAF stands for Web Application Firewall. So this is helping protect the applications. So you might have deployed an application, a web style application. It might be a hand-built web application you've done on .NET, or it might be something out of the box like WordPress or something like that. And that can be hacked. So there might be holes in that application that you need to protect. So that's what the WAF's doing. It protects against layer TCP layer 7 attacks, web attacks, repeated login attempts, and you can do rate-based rules. You can protect against things like SQL injection attacks, which are less common, but when you get them, they're quite devastating SQL injection attacks. And all these attacks are based on someone's done a poor bit of coding. For example, I'll give you an idea what an SQL injection attack. If you put in a form, say you put in your address, and you put in a form, you start it with a closed apostrophe, closed semicolon, and then delete from customers. something like that. So what that does, you thought you were writing the address into SQL, like SQL insert, and then it ended that SQL command and appended another one. And then all of a sudden, you've lost your customers table. So that's how your application could be attacked by SQL injection. These are priced per rule, and there's a small fee for how many URL requests you do have. And there's a thing called managed rules, where the rules, so you can handwrite all the rules, or you can buy rule sets from some other vendors in the marketplace. I'll let you click on that and have a look at that later. But the idea of hand coding the rules is a bit arduous, but the whole idea of the WAF is to buy the rules that you need. Someone's asking about the cost of those. Yeah, so the marketplace, those rules will cost a certain amount per month depending on who you get the rules from, so they're not free. And the marketplace is another place you can get the security from as well. So as I just mentioned, you can get the managed AWS WAF rules, but you can also get security appliances from most popular vendors. Usually that comes in the form of an EC2 instance that runs their fancy security software and runs an extra firewall for you above and beyond what AWS is doing for you. And I've just got to the next slide. Here's some of the vendors that have got their security appliances up on Amazon. So I don't know, as a corporate, you might already have some Barracuda email spam filtering. So instead of getting rid of Barracuda because you like it, you can just move to Barracuda on AWS, or you might have a checkpoint firewall. So instead of getting rid of your checkpoint firewall, you can convert all your rules, run it in AWS, and get that security appliance to manage your security. So, you know, there's Cisco stuff here, and I don't know, whole bunch of different people. So that's another way you can manage your security. Yeah, okay. So someone's asking, is it TCP layer 7 or OSI 7 layer? My guess is it's OSI 7 layer, but I said TCP layer. Anyway, I might have to check my terminology on some of those slides. Let's have a look at the infrastructure security at AWS. So we're stepping down some different levels. So the first couple of levels were beyond your instances and out on the network and on the internet before the packets got to your infrastructure. So now we're looking at, as I get closer to your infrastructure, how do you manage that? So EC2 instances can be hacked, and the operating system can be hacked. So it all depends what operating system you put on there and how hackable it is, because Amazon don't know what you've put on there. So obviously, if it's a DB2 RDS type instance, it's Amazon's problem to protect it. But the idea here is you've got security groups and network ACLs, and these are very similar to the traditional firewalls, where you're allowing IP addresses, port numbers, protocol combinations. So you might be saying, we're going to allow TCP port 443 to come from the web and access our application. But we don't want port 25, we don't want port 53, we don't want a whole bunch of other ports that might be open with other applications from the internet. We only want to allow port 443, which is HTTPS. So you can control what traffic comes into your instance, so traditional firewall. And you can use security groups as source and destination names just to make it, so you can make a security group called my web servers and a security group called your database servers. And then you can say from the web servers connecting to the database servers, you can connect on port, whatever the port 3306. And the idea is to break up your infrastructure into different subnets in your VPC. And that's very similar to what you should be doing in in your off premises as well, having some more protected subnets and less protected subnets. And then you can have different rules for different subnets. So you'd have a web tier that's a bit less protected, and you might have a data tier that doesn't allow access directly from the internet. It only allows access from the web tier. Okay, where are we up to on time? Yep, we're going pretty good on time. IAM. So IAM is what we use at AWS to manage accounts. We manage users, we manage groups, we manage policies. And policies are assigned to users, groups, or roles, and then we manage roles. We're going to go step through that into a bit more detail as we go through. So IAM is how we allow authorized users to access systems, databases, instances, you name it, different AWS resources. So basically the idea is you have some top level admins where they get all the access. Then you're supposed to create groups that have got less access. And then eventually you have groups with very limited access. You might have a group that's only allowed to access, say, one particular DynamoDB called the Books app, and you allow that to a particular application. So we have policies and we can apply them to groups, and we have policies and you can apply them to roles. And this is what a policy looks like. They're JSON stored as JSON documents up in AWS. And this is the three things I always need. This is a common question in the certification exams, is effect, action, and resource. So in this instance, the effect is allow. The action is S3 list bucket. So you're allowing to list buckets, and you're allowed to list buckets, but only on this particular bucket. So if you had this resource, you could just look up the exam. If you have this policy applied to you, you could just look up the exam answers. That'd be lovely. Okay, access keys. So as part of IAM, you can generate access keys. So it's a two-part key. You have an access key and a secret key, and they're attached to a user, and you can enable and disable them, and you can create and delete them. I personally hate them because they get left lying around. You can't work out what they are by just looking at them, and you can't tell by looking at them if they're valid. So they can get quite a bit messy in organizations, so be a little bit careful of them. When you're using the AWS command line interface, and you've seen a few examples of it before, me using it, when like I've done AWS S3 LS. So this is an example of an AWS command line interface. You can authenticate using the access keys, or you can put a role onto the instances to get access. I'm going to show. All right. So IAM roles. That's my next slide. So it's like a user, but without a password or access keys. And there's three different spots that it often gets used for. It often gets used in cross-service AWS authorization. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one, but now and again, you delegate access from your resources to Amazon, so Amazon can do part of their job for you, which is a bit complicated. So if you've got a Lambda function that Amazon's going to run for you, they might need to access a DynamoDB. So you can give out access to AWS for some sorts of things. You use them for federated access, and you can allocate them to an EC2 instance, which is what I'm going to demo to you in a sec. Okay, so this is going to be the first demo tonight. Now what I'm going to show you, instances, let's refresh this. All right, still a bit of a mess. Let me see. Didn't I put it through beside here? All right. Let me just find it. I just started this instance before. Just want to grab its public address. SSH to EC2 user. So I created this about an hour ago, and I've installed Amazon's Linux. One of the good things about this install is it comes with a command line tool. So people are asking where to get it from. Easy way to get it is just install an instance with the Amazon Linux. So if I do AWS S3LS to list buckets, it says I'm not configured. I don't have any credentials. One way to do it is AWS configure. And it asks me for the access key. So if I go put an access key in here, this is obviously just random stuff I'm typing, it'll store it in clear text, I think, on this machine. And even if it's not clear text, anyone that gets into this machine has got access to that access key and can copy it off. And so it's not very good in terms of security. And then they could use that access key from somewhere else potentially. Yeah, Sean P says it's clear text. So it's not a good way of managing your security is having these keys sit around on machines. Imagine, okay, you put it on now and you put it on for a particular reason to access S3 buckets, but it might get left there for a year or two and no one remembers it and this machine gets hacked and someone steals the keys and got access to some of your S3 buckets. So it's a poor way of doing things. So how are we going to list this bucket without using the keys? So what we're going to do is go into this short course, instance settings, and we're going to attach replace a role. And I'll show you these roles in a sec, but I've created a role called allow access to S3. So as soon as we do it, these are processed pretty quickly, and I can do AWS S3LS. So now I can access the buckets straight away. If I want to have a look at this one, this is the one I'm allowed access to. And then away you go. There's some files in the bucket. And nowhere did I put the access key in. And if this machine gets hacked, this machine still got, any user's got access to those S3 buckets, but not the access keys. So they can't duplicate the security off there. And obviously you would have, when you deployed the security, you would have known that potentially someone could get to those access buckets. One role can be attached to many instances. Yeah, some questions are coming up there. Let me just have a look at a quick couple of questions. Payal asks, are managed services more secure than non-managed services? The managed rules is because, say you had an application, say for WordPress, and you wanted to put some WAF rules in for WordPress, you'd have to sit there and work out all the rules you wanted and add to them over time. It's going to take you a long time to learn, a long time to write all the rules, and you just go nuts doing it. So the idea is to find some provider that provides managed rules to secure WordPress environments or managed rules to defend PHP applications in general. So it's taking someone else's skill and experience to give you the rules rather than trying to work them out yourselves. What does Shield Advanced have that the basic doesn't? Sam asks. I think get a Google page up about that. It's largely reporting on the AWS Shield and what happens, and to know it's AWS Shield's blocking and not blocking, so you can have a look from a corporate point of view. because general users, if it's blocked, who cares? It's a good thing that blocks stuff. Is there any limitation on the numbers of users in IAM? I don't think so. Baya? Okay, we'll get back to the slides. So not using the username, the access key and secret key, you get better security from not using it, in my opinion. Okay, AWS make a big deal about securing your root credentials. This is almost in all certification exams, these type of questions. Here's a link that you should have a look at later on, but I just summarized it here. You need to enable multi-factor authentication. Most IT people should know what that is by now on your AWS root account. So you just can't be password guessed. Only use the root account to create initial users and groups. So you shouldn't be using the root account every day of the week, because you should create some other users. And you should disable the root access keys and secret keys, which this forces you to use other users if you're going to, because the access, if say someone stole your access key, your root access keys off a machine, well, now you're in trouble. They can just delete instances, delete stuff on S3, totally mess you up. So it's better that they don't sit around, because you shouldn't have them. Anyway, there's the three main things that you should think about. In that document, there's a few other things you should think about as well, but it's pretty important to secure your AWS root credentials. Pretty important. Okay, how are we going for time? We're halfway. Ooh, I went through the slides a bit too quickly, I think, tonight. That's okay. We might have some more questions. So here's a bit about the exams. So you need to review the slides. You need to review the textbook that we had earlier listed, and the AWS product pages and FAQ pages. This is where most of the exam questions come from in the certifications anyway. Pale said, what textbook is he talking about? There was a textbook listed in week 1. It was on Amazon. I'll make sure it gets reposted so people can have a look at it.
Yeah, we'll chuck it in the exam spiel. There's a bunch of information on the Moodle page. Make sure it's in there.
And you've got any questions about security?
While you're thinking about them, folks, we'll chuck a few questions in. I'll just go over the...
Asking about, is AWS more secure than Azure or Google? I would say they're all the same. You can do stupid things on them all and don't secure your applications correctly. It's very hard, the big three, to say they're very much different. I'm only an expert on AWS. If you're a huge Microsoft house, you might want to consider Azure. Oh, there's a funny question. No, H asks, if you delete the security keys, will you need them? No, you don't really ever need them. They're really only used if you're going to use the AWS command line interface or some application, and neither places that you want to put use those root keys, you actually should put them. So the whole idea is to delete them, and you can regenerate them in the future if you want them anyway. So you're better off not having them around. I'm looking in the chat as well as the questions. Is there an AWS security assessment service to validate your environment to identify security gaps? There is an automated tool. Let me think. It's called Advisor something or other, AWS Advisor. Anyway, there's an automated tool that will go through your environment and try to pick up some silly things you've done. I don't know that it's going to pick up all security issues, but it'll pick up things where you've got defaults or open defaults. Someone asks, is Shield cost per account or per organization? Well, the Shield standard is free and the Shield advanced, I don't know if it's per account or per organization, but you'd hope $3,000 a month covers a fair chunk of what you need, and they wouldn't charge you the same thing too many times. What's the major differences between security groups and ACLs? Good question. Security groups is between the subnets, and it's not stateful, and the security groups are stateful and from the internet to your VPC. So they perform a slightly different role, and one's stateful and one's stateless. But that's a good question. That's sort of things that you need a bit more detail on. We do have a VPC, a whole lecture on VPC. And so this lecture is just a little taste of a few things, because the full lecture on VPC gets straight into those. And VPC is quite important that you learn that really well. There's tons of questions on VPCs in the certification exams. How can we secure data with MFA? Well, you secure the accounts with MFA. So you secure accounts with MFA, and then you're applying roles to groups that allow those users to access resources. So if there's a really important resource, you make it the only way you can get to it is from a certain group, and then you make sure that group's all got MFA on it. AWS Shield logs. Well, everything goes into cloud, and it's not CloudFront. What's the cloud logging thing called? Man, logging. I've written CloudFront. That's wrong. CloudTrail. I always get the two mixed up because they just pretty much sound the same. So all logging from AWS goes to CloudTrail, and then you've got to sort of write reports and filters on what you want to see. So every time you start an instance, stop an instance, do something, it gets logged in CloudTrail, and then you can go and have a look at that later about who's been doing what later on. Is there a requirement that we give that we need to give the exam in a particular duration after it is released? I don't really understand that question.
That might be about the short course exam. No, you can do the short course exam at any time.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, got it. I now understand it.
In fact, all of the resources from this short course will be available for, the foreseeable future.
Yeah. So we've answered this MFA one. Are you able to comment on some essential security procedures in multi-tenancy? So you're talking about EC2 instances that are in multi-tenancy environments. AWS, that's their job to make sure that one EC2 instance doesn't bleed into another. So a lot of the things, you've got to understand the separation of responsibilities, which is a big deal at AWS. So if the responsibility is on their side, they take care of it. And the only way you can do anything about it is to audit their procedures and so forth that they do. You can ask for a list of their procedures and what they do if you're doing a proper audit. But if it's on their side of the fence, it's their responsibility, then it's sort of like you've got to leave it up to them. What about use of hardware and security keys like YubiKey? Does this work with IAM? I'm pretty sure all of those sorts of things work. I haven't tested them, and I don't know the list exactly what things work, but lots of those corporate, you know, magic key things all generally work. A lot of people use Google Authenticator. I don't like Google Authenticator. I use Authy because it backs up your, because if you've ever got a new phone and you've noticed that all your Google Authenticator things don't work on your new phone, then you have to go and redo them. It's a bit of a pain. If you use the app called Authy, then your new phone just straight away keeps working. Can you use geo-blocking and AWS network ACLs? No, but you can use geo-blocking in the AWS WAF, I believe. So it depends on which product, but the network ACLs do not understand, and the security groups do not understand geo stuff, but the AWS WAF does. So that's where you'd put that rule in if you wanted to have a geo-blocking rule. If you change your access keys for the database servers, do you have to update and restart the web servers to use the new keys? No. A lot of things just go live as soon as you change them. And remember I said we shouldn't be writing the access keys and secret keys into the instances anyway. We should be applying a role to the instance to allow it to access the required things. And if you saw the demo before, I just went and changed the role on the EC2 instance, and it's immediately effective. So you shouldn't be using the access keys at all. And basically, if you're storing access keys on machines, you're being lazy and doing the wrong thing and causing yourself a future security breach. So you shouldn't be using the access keys at all. Does AWS have a DMZ? Good question, Anonymous. That's what I was talking about, using a VPC. So I've got a bigger lecture on VPC, but a DMZ is a way of having your different servers subnetted off for different security. And that is what you try to achieve with the VPC. Definitely. So the answer is yes. Use a VPC, use security groups, use network access controls to manage your DMZ, to create a DMZ. This next one doesn't look like a question. How does it work? Oh, all right. All right, now there's a question. With Microsoft, when it comes to MFA, if you don't want to sync your password, you must install the federated server to authenticate your users. So yeah, so there's a lot of support for federating the username, passwords, and whatnot back to something like Microsoft. So you can connect up access to that sort of thing. So that works. So you just need to look up, there's two different ways of doing it to get access to the Microsoft tree. Can CloudTrain export to SIEM? I'm not sure what CloudTrain is, and I'm not sure what SIEM is, so I don't know the answer to that question. There's got to be some questions I don't know what they are. Is there an AWS product or service which can generate a network diagram for existing apps and databases deployed? Yes, there is, Pale. Let me think of what it's called. Someone else might know the name of it. But you can take a whole bunch of deployed AWS services, like some VPCs, some EC2 instances, and a database, and all your rules, and you can output it to a tool, so you can reuse that later on, and it gives you a visual representation of it. I've got a demo of it in one of my classes. I can't think of the name of the tool straight up. CloudFormation. Thanks, Brett. Good on you. I knew someone would know the word. There's too many words at AWS. So yeah, there's a thing called CloudFormation, and you can import and export a whole bunch of AWS stuff, and it gives you a beautiful diagram. So definitely use it. Is there a way to automatically create an IAM user through the, so you can do everything through the command line, or like we said, you can federate an existing directory, be it a Microsoft directory or an LDAP directory or something like that. can Cloudflare or similar services be used on AWS? So yeah, if you use Cloudflare to run the DNS, that's fine. And where are we up to? Great. Let's have a look at the next demo. I've got another demo next. Let me see where we're up to. Questions, right. Now, this is a project I ran a little while ago, and it's called WordPress Hosting Performance Check. And there's a link to it later on. So it's a distributed load test for WordPress. And here's the challenges that I first faced. We needed enough CPU power to run the test for 25,000 simulated users. So the idea is we're going to have a WordPress or a WordPress cluster, and we want to simulate 25,000 users. So people might be running large events or they're running large shopping sites, and they want to know, can they take this amount of server load? So I worked out at the time, the most number of cores you could get to was 72. I think you can get to more cores now. And that was about enough for about 50% of my CPU requirements. But I also ran into challenges with open TCP sockets. So each simulated user needed about 5 TCP sockets per simulated user. And so if we're simulating 25,000 users, Linux just runs out of sockets. And so every time you open a new connection, it just fails. So you needed more than one server to run it anyway. So the idea is, let's scale horizontal instead of to get more cores and more TCP sockets. So we talked a lot about horizontal scaling before. And people also noticed spot instances are a lot cheaper. And then, but every time a question comes up, EC2 spot instances is usually not the answer. And so why are they there? So in this project, I did get to use EC2 spot instances. It aggregates the CPU network. It launches a right-sized fleet for the task. And I haven't talked to you guys much about this golden image issue. So I'm dealing based on a different lecture I didn't give you. But the idea of a golden image is, if you're going to build out a fleet, they need to image off something, a Linux install. And if each one's going to do a slightly different job, how do you get that into the golden image? So use this thing called user data, which I'm going to demo in a minute. So when they launch, they know a little bit about what they're supposed to be working on. So if we're going to launch a fleet to do some testing, they each need to do a slightly different bit of testing and then report back. So the VPC is trusted for the bootstrap and results reporting. So using security groups. So this is a common thing. So we're only going to allow access from a particular security group to do this updating of reports. So even though it's over HTTP, in a minute you'll see some of it, but it's only accessible inside the VPC. And the EC2 instance is trusted for the EC2 start stop and the fleet start stop. But we talked about that before, applying the right security groups. So I'm just going to show you some parts of it before I do the demo. So this is the EC2 spot fleet request. I'm going to do it in region US East 1, spot, and then you say which is the config file, and this file.json. And this is an example of the file. So you might say we want a one set. You won't get any spot instances if you say 1 cent. We'll say $1. So this is saying we're willing to pay up to $1 an hour. I'm going to change it to $5. And we want a target capacity of 10. I don't know, that's pretty boring. Let's say we want 100 instances to run. And this, I talked about this before, when we're delegating out to Amazon to give them access to do jobs on our behalf. It's complicated, but we need access to run the spot requests, but Amazon needs some delegated access to create EC2 instances and stop them for us, because by default, they're not allowed to go in and do stuff in our environment, Amazon. So we're temporarily giving them access to this thing called AWS EC2 spot fleet tagging role. So they have that role, and they can create instances, EC2 instances for us. Type request, terminate. This is you put in an AMI ID, which is the golden image I talked about in the last slide. You have a security group. So this is their authorization on your network to get through your firewall and do things. What instance type do you want? M3 large. And this is the user data I'm going to talk to you a bit more about. And it's MD5, some base 64 or something or other, encoded so that it goes into a JSON file, okay. And then you give a list of subnets on your VPC that you're allowed to use. Yeah, Michael says it's base 64 encoded, right. I knew it was one of them. And this is an example of the user data before it was base 64 encoded. So these two things are going to get passed in at runtime, a secret and a timeout. I'm sure there was more things that I passed in. And here's a little interesting thing. I've seen this in certification exams before. This is a particular IP address you can use in Amazon, and you can get out different metadata out of your instance. So if you want to get your instance ID, there's a query to get your instance ID off your instance. So I just get that out to use it as part of logging. So all the logs don't have the same name. And this is how each instance, it does its job, does this load test using JMeter, and then it SCPs up the result at the end of the test, and then halts the instance. And when spot instances get halted, they get turned off. And this is the IAM policy that's on the master instance. And remember, before, you need an action, effect, and resource. So we're allowing EC2 spot requests and cancel spot fleet requests. And we're saying allow and star. So any sorts of these requests that you do, you're good to go. So now I'm going to do a bit more. I'm going to do the demo for you. Right. Now, it would be nice if this was tidier. Right, that's lucky. After you've killed an instance, they stay around for about an hour, and then they clear out of your console, which is handy. So we're going to look that we've got a couple of cancelled fleets here because other people have been using it. And instances, we've got 3 instances. And this is a short course. Remember, I've been telling you, make sure you delete your things. I've got to go and delete this later. So we've got 2 instances running. So now I'm going to bring up a web page. Ooh, I think it's already here somewhere. No. Yeah, that looks like it. I'll just go dashboard. Oh, that doesn't look good. It's not HTTP. And we go down to load test. And we're going to run the load test from the United States. And we're going to simulate, let's simulate 500 users. That should be exciting. We're going to run the test for 60 seconds. And we want to wait 10 seconds between page clicks. And I'm going to click go. So this script submits the request to the load test server. And then the load test server checks that you've got a real test and you're not a hacker. So it does this secret matching thing. And then it starts doing magic. Let's see if it's got the new spot request. Right, so let's see. if I can see what's going on here. So here's the fleet request, and we've requested a capacity of 10. So the application works out how many you need based on how many users you asked for. And Amazon went and made 10 sub requests. Makes a mess of your console, but that's how it does it. And then over on your instances page, I've got 10 more instances running. They're all initializing at the sec. Each one of these is going to do its job of doing the load testing. Yeah, why am I using North Virginia? I don't know. I think it's mostly because I've been using AWS a long, long time, and I bet you US one was the very first one, and so I've just got a bit of, I've been using it for ages. No real reason. I think that the prices across the complete OS is the same, across the US is the same. So all these instances are running. I might see if I can SSH into one, just for something to do. Copy the public IP address. I think they're Ubuntu instances, because I use a lot of Ubuntu. That didn't seem to work very well. Let me try something different. All right, I don't know. I don't have enough security access. I'd have to think about what I did. Where's your data load rating, and how does that scale with the load increase? Yeah, I'm testing a very non-scalable staging WordPress site, and it's likely to break. But obviously you're supposed to have a lot bigger ones that don't break. Let me see. Let me see what else I can show you. Other than these instances, now they're starting to shut down. So remember, the user data did their job in running the halt. This is the halt command running now. So each server must have finished uploading the data. And instead of waiting for it, I'm going to show you what the outcome looks like. There's a load test here. Here's one that's been run in the past, say with 120 user load or something. One in the past. And you get a graph back saying how many requests. I think this was a much lower load. How your different URLs went, some percentages, and you get some nice graphs and charts out of it. But the idea is you can scale it up bigger than one instance could do testing. So if you want a whole fleet of testing, up to 25,000 users to test your application, that's what it's built to do. Let me go back over to the console. So these are all getting terminated now. So the spot, so when the application finishes running, it kills the spot fleet. And as soon as it kills the spot fleet, then all instances get killed, whether they're finished or not. So that's why the instance is going into the terminating mode. So they're all terminated. Anyway, let's just give you an example of how an application can start up a bunch of instances, get them to do some work, and then shut down. You might have a report generating engine, So instead of having all the instances sitting there ready for jobs, you just launch them as you need them and stop them. And that way, if you get a big glut of reports you need to do, you can just launch more and more and more instances and kill them off when they're finished. No, AWS, that's not counted as load testing in AWS. That's just where you go. If you're doing penetration testing, pen testing, you need to get AWS permission first, but that's not pen testing, that's doing load testing. That's okay. Because basically you've got CPUs and networks and you can use them to do what you want. Yeah, you need a public IP because when that security check up front, wrong button, that security check up front I did requires this secret match thing, requires a publicly addressable WordPress. Yeah, Rob, probably I needed SSH in my security group from the IP I was from. Obviously wasn't from a trusted spot. So when that fleet launches, I've probably only got access from that master to them. It makes sense. You wouldn't want them open to the world anyway. Anthony said, latency isn't very good over the Pacific Rim and back. I agree. So that's why I've occasionally picked from Australia or United States to do the test from. So I've got the same sort of thing set up in Australia. Any other questions? Just as a general question, do people think now that the AWS cloud is more secure than on-premise or less secure than on-premise? Anthony says more. David says more. Someone says depends. Don says the same. Depends how good on your internal IT is. Yeah, the different risk profiles. I think one of the big things is physical security. If you're a bank and you've got physical security aced, then I think AWS and internal IT is similar. But if you're a small to medium business and you haven't got good physical security, you're better off just going to AWS. Ross says you still have to secure the application. Yeah, that's right. But I say that you've got more and better tools that you can more easily access at AWS and you can just pay by the month. Most people don't think that deploying an application, they don't think of all the security and that you need to put a few layers of security on, otherwise it's going to get hacked. So. Ben says it's more accessible to broad audience. I don't really think it is. Once you open an internet port, whether it's on internal or at AWS, you've got an open internet port. So that's pretty accessible to everyone. Dan says depth in defense. Yep, that sounds like the right idea. Put a few layers of security for them to get through. Yeah, and Ben says the ability to secure is more accessible. So that is my main point. Like you get AWS Shield for free, which has a whole bunch of DDoS support. Like if you're on premise, you're always fighting DDoS stuff. Like it's just a pain. So straight away that's gone. And if you do have some problems and you're in an AWS environment, you just turn stuff on until the problem goes away. So I think you've got a lot more tools and you can pay by the month. So I think there's just a lot better. Do they automatically patch regularly? Oz Knight asks. Well, remember it depends on if it's it's on their side of the fence or on your side of the fence. So if you've gone RDS, it's their job to patch, isn't it? If you're running an instance yourself in your own database, it's your job to patch. So it depends whose responsibility it is. Yeah, the hypervisor stuff, that's clearly on their side of the fence. They keep changing the hypervisor too. I don't know if people watch that. About every year or so, they release, well, we've got this new, better Nitro hypervisor. You know, to most
So
users.
you know it's good.
I think we're just about done there, Guy.
Yeah, beauty. Okay. So were all of those extra slides, there was a couple of...
Yeah, I decided I didn't really like them.
Okay, good. Something for people to look at later on.
Yep.
Yeah, beauty. Bloody interesting. I wish I understood more of it.
It's a big topic, security.
Yeah, super cool.
So obviously in the full course, we've got a lot more slides on it. We've got a whole week on VPCs, and that is the cornerstone of a lot of the security. And as people said, how do you get a DMZ and so forth? And so the bit missing really is VPCs from today.
Mm. And of course, there's a bunch of security subjects outside of your subject.
Yep.
Yeah. Beauty, very interesting. All right. Well, might start wrapping up then. If anyone has some last minute questions, chuck them in while I'm waffling on, as I tend to do. Just a reminder that we'll get the exam out by Friday, close of business our time. And let us know if you've got any issues with the email address that's on the Moodle page. I'll also say once you've completed the course, I'd really appreciate if you took a couple extra minutes to complete the course satisfaction survey, which is where you can give us all of your feedback, ringing endorsements of Scott, no doubt, and trashing us, perhaps, admin staff. But yeah, just it has a few questions related to the course itself. Only takes a few minutes, and yeah, we'll make sure we incorporate any feedback that you send into, I guess, what we do for future short courses. I should say some thank yous as well. Thank you to Jason Howarth from CSU for presenting last week. Thank you to Chantel and Barry for the support in the IT Masters, from the IT Masters side of things. Importantly, thank you for attending live. I really love the live webinars, and you just saw how good it can be when you know the mentor can interact with people in real time. So yeah, your participation helps ensure more short courses come, and I think that's something that I think we can all get behind. There's all sorts of information about further study on the course page as well, so have a look there, and all of the exam information is there crucially, so have a look there before sitting it, before you click the go button. I hope you've all enjoyed the course, and I'll hand over to you, Scott, for the last time to bring us to a close. And of course, a huge thanks must go to you for your time and clearly expertise in AWS. It's been so far above my head that it's been a bit difficult to help, and I'm sorry for that. But it's been really interesting to watch.
I don't think I'm going to say much more, Guy, other than thanks for the questions and thanks for the contributions from the students. I think that makes me just not think I'm sitting here talking to the screen. So it's good. I enjoyed interaction.
Great. All righty. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks so much for Scott. Yeah, it's been really good.